will to disseminate the teachings of this religion. And also there's this ancient, other known religions such as Jewish religion and Christianity. They also had this civilization-based competition as well. Back in those days, Byzantium or Sasani, the Hellenistic culture, Sasanian and Egyptian, these are the, certainly this first facing was through the conflicts, but then comes with the emergence of such wealth of culture in Baghdad, especially in the Abbasi term, and Harun Rashid's Abbasid. The movement of translation was the first step. Certainly we were the representatives of our religion, however, with the feeling that there is the superiority, and also in line with the prerequisite and the responsibility of the religion. And there are so many, as you know, and with this responsibility and with the verses that request the Muslim to travel around the world to gather knowledge, and also with the struggle or the effort to understand the world more, there's the movement of translation. Certainly it started with the medicine-related or mathematics books and other with the effort to understand the universe and nature more. There were some astrological books as well to be translated. And back in those days, especially in the ancient Greek civilization, the Aristoteles and the philosophical heritage was to be translated into Arabic as well, and also the Hellenistic heritage as well, also Iran, Sasanian, and the governance and administration traditions, and the science related, the Galen and Hippocrates medicine related books or writings being translated in between the 7th, 8th, and 9th centuries. There was a very serious and also there's this Abbasi, and there was the tradition
neredeyse bu bilim alanları kesilmiş olan Orta Çağ Hristiyanlığının bu Müslümanların gerçekleştirdiği bu büyük başarılar karşısında bunları da Haçlı seferleriyle görüyorlar. Ölçüsü kurtarma hevesiyle Doğu'ya yöneldiklerinde bakıyorlar karşıda çok gelişmiş bir medeniyet var.
And there is an accumulation of
bu karşılaşma Haçlıları da yeniden kendini değerlendirmek durumunda bırakıyor ve bu yani 8. 10. yüzyıl arasında Müslümanların gerçekleştirdiği çevirilerle sonrasında oluşan İslam bilimleri düşüncesi ters bir şekilde bu sefer nereden? Bu ikinci karşılaşma dediğimiz şey. Tabii İslam fethiyle bütün Kuzey Afrika boyunca devam ediyor. 10. yüzyılda daha Endülüs'e ulaştığında Endülüs kurulan İber Yarımadası'nda Emevi hakimiyeti, biliyorsunuz Emevi hakimiyeti aslında Doğu'da Abbasilere yeniliyor ama Batı'da Endülüs'te Emevi hakimiyeti devam ediyor.
The representatives of Emevis in the and in 1492 and with the 7th century, and this also brings enlightenment with these translations. And Alexandria Basin and the Islamic tradition and the civilization and the accumulation meeting with the Western, and also at the west part of Mediterranean, in Andalusia, in the peninsula of Spain, and also in Morocco, in Algeria, in the northern Africa, there is the West Islamic science. All these mergence, all these meetings has caused the West to redefine for instance, certainly the Renaissance has been built and based on these convergence. And there, as they were looking into the origins of their roots, for instance, starting as of the 4th century, and after Alexandria in the Hellenistic period, the original and scientific and philosophical movement is halted, it's stopped, and the church, in fact, brings forbidden, the church brings bannings, and these books are all locked in the storages of churches, and until Mansur has these books and translated from Greek and Syriac, and they also, there is a philosopher as Ibn Sina and Ibn Haldun, and for instance there is the El Kanun bil Tib, which is the rules of medicine. It is translated back to from Latin and to also Latin as well. So this is a 600-year development. All these books taken from the rooms and attics of the churches are translated, also initiates the rise of the infrastructure based on which Renaissance is triggered. And there are so many details here. Ibn Rushd and Ibn Bace and all these Ibn Haldun, Ibn Bace, and I have 2 minutes, if I may mention about Ottoman era. The third meeting of these civilizational interaction is when the Selçuks, continuation of Selçuk was the Ottoman era, where the West is also West and East comes together. There is a military structure that's introduced by Ottoman Empire that's very strong, but also Baghdad and Damascus centered accumulation of civilizations is also shouldered by Ottomans, and with the conquer of Constantinople or Istanbul, the Eastern Roman Empire is given an end. And from the Balkans, and also the movements and towards Indonesia and in the northern part of Africa, and there is a new interaction as well. Islamic culture and civilization is also carried to Indonesia as well. In these expeditions and military expeditions made to these geographies, and not only for the competitions and the relations, it all feeds into that. As a result, I know this is not a topic to be addressed in 15 minutes, but if I may address, certainly all these powers and in the, for instance, British, French, and American and Russian powers are also focusing on this geography. It's not only because of the richness, underground richness, but it's also because of the civilization and the movement of these cultural interactions and civilizational interactions. These are the reasons why it attracts such attention of powers as well. And what we need to ask the question is, and this platform, this can be geared towards a peace and peaceful environment with the fair share of the resources. All the wealth can be shared in the amicable way possible. But what's really more important is based on the geostrategical importance of the region, because, as you know, the axis of the world is shifting towards east to China. There's a production going on over there. However, in the last 4,000 years, we have seen how this region is quite central and based on the cooperation between the countries and based on building the interaction and communication between parties, there can be a good path as well. I have an optimist approach here, and we can. I believe that we can continue. Thank you so much for this great presentation. Now we will have Professor Dr. Ramazan ERDAŞ from Eskişehir Osmangazi University, and he will be talking about fundamentals of Turkey's Eastern Mediterranean policy and its contribution to security and cooperation in the Mediterranean. Professor Dr. ERDAŞ, the floor is yours. Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much. And in the making of the symposium, I would like to extend my gratitude to Professor Enver Arpa and his team, the Social Science University of Ankara and their representative here in TRNC. And thank you all. And I would like to also extend my gratitude to Orsam and TİKA. And I will be focusing on the fundamentals of Turkey's Eastern Mediterranean policy and how it contributed to security and cooperation in the Mediterranean. Eastern Mediterranean has been shaped on the guarantorship agreement, the peace operation for the TNRC and the UN, and this has been mostly built upon Cyprus. And as our president has mentioned, a new policy, two-state solution is now given the initiative now. In the region, our policy has been shaped for the Eastern Mediterranean. The coastline of the countries here they had their coastline here, and these countries also discovered the natural gas reserves, and this has added the energy dimension. And this has also created a competition in the international arena. Regional and non-regional actors are doing their best to get a share of this energy in order to penetrate into this influential topic of energy and natural gas. In terms of the energy dimension of Turkey's Eastern Mediterranean policy, sovereignty rights is certainly to be preserved. Defending the sovereignty rights is what Turkey has been focusing on, because the more it becomes international competition and rivalry, the sovereignty rights are more and more limited, because we see this Turkey civil, and we see this, and civil map is one of them. And this is about international law dimension. And in the marine jurisdiction area, there is this conflict-based or disputes, or because Turkey has declared its economic exclusive zone, and the exploration of the natural gas is within this EEZ. However, in Eastern Mediterranean, this is a little bit more complicated. And if I may say, there is a foreign policy process that has been being conducted here, where every little step is calculated, and we're trying to see into the complexity of these. The sovereignty rights and the international law are being closely watched. This is where Turkey stands, so that all these are to be introduced in details to the international audience. So once we speak of EEZ, other than the Black Sea region, this is going step by step and based on bilateral agreement, and the strategy of Turkey is that this is recognized more and more through the bilateral agreements. And here, with a good timing, Turkey has undertaken this step as to prevent any exclusion of Turkey and TRNC. I think that's what the agreement between Turkey and Libya speaks for. And as you know, the international law, if two sovereign countries, if they reach an agreement, it's in no need of being approved by the UN. And they have declared, Turkey and Libya has declared this, and this has been then recognized at the international level. And the second step is the TNRC, the sovereignty rights, to preserve them, because there is this, unfortunately, the promises made by West have not been kept, and all the current developments have once again showed that we need to strengthen our relations with TRNC. And the Turkey petroleum, and we have been working and studying together, and USA and Greece, and they have their own kind of fortification and creating sense against Turkey. And for the seismic detection steps, we have also completed our steps for this. And there is this, certainly we have the petroleum detection steps, and this was actualized by the Italian vessels. However, in we have 2 seismic detection, and we have 4 drilling vessels, and we have our fleet, and with the national and indigenous vessels, and we have our national personnel. So we have the energy experts as well, where we to undertake the drilling operations as well with the local and with the indigenous vessels and means. So at the 3rd level, the national drilling fleet is completed. So these are the parts and components of Turkey's foreign policy, and the security of the Mediterranean, and the concrete contribution will be through the international cooperation. Our presidents, Mr. Tayyip Erdoğan, Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, and regarding these, and he has come up with a very concrete recommendation and a suggestion in line with the international law, and this was a strong message to the international audience. Eastern Mediterranean dialogue, Eastern Mediterranean platform are brought by and introduced by ourselves, so that it could be a common ground to, an effort. So I know that Mr. President, our president, has come up with a suggestion as to introduce these in order to have a common understanding to build these. And all these platforms, is it possible for this platform to come up with a solution about the status of Caspian Sea? There has been some long-going discussions, and the Caspian Sea countries that are riparian to Caspian Sea are an example. So, similar to the strategy, just as how it has been turned into a success story for the riparian countries to Caspian Sea, similar to that, we can complete it here. There has been a concrete example, and diplomatic negotiations are challenging, certainly. And so far, what the 10 out of 10, only one of the negotiations can be concluded by consensus. Most of the time, there would be no consensus. And Turkey's Turkey's suggestions should be then risks for Republic of Turkey, and what kind of steps there have been flaming and heated discussion where the energy crisis has become more and more that we had. This also threatens the security and also ISTMIT project and civil map. Although this has no feasibility, and the efforts to construct the pipelines and the provocative statements by Greece and in the instability and this intervention of the non-regional actors and their interventions to Eastern Mediterranean, and these are all eliminated. And the northern part of Syria, where we have the counter-terrorism operations and the agreement we had with Libya and the cooperation that we have with TRNC, and how we came up and how we addressed the hideous July 15th military coup attempt, and all these were all responses. In the next term to come, certainly the current cooperation we have with TRNC will be deepened, and it will be made more and more stronger. As a last statement, TANAP project, with the TANAP project in the East and West corridor, Turkey has increased its say, and there is the stream. If a cooperation where Turkey is, especially with the riparian countries, this multi relations is what Republic of Turkey is building for, and for a better future. Professor Ramazan, thank you. And Mr. Samir, are you here? Professor Dr. Samir, are you here?
هتكون بالعربي.
العربي انا راح اترجمها بالتركي ان شاء الله سيدي.
اوكي. السلام عليكم. بروفيسور سمير جريمس من المدرسة الوطنية العليا لعلوم البحر وتنمية الساحل بالجزائر. المداخلة اللي قدمها اليوم سوف تكون مقاربة بالنسبة كيفية يعني السلامة البيئية أو الأمن البيئي وحتى السلامة المناخية كيف تتحول إلى عامل من عوامل الأمن الوطني.
Benim müdahalem özellikle Cezayir'den katılmaktayım. Benim müdahalem daha çok iklim güvenliği ile ilgili ve iklim güvenliğinin ortaya koymuş olduğu etken rolünden bahsedeceğim. Özellikle güvenlik açısından.
المعروف تقليديا أن الأمن مرتبط يعني بالأبعاد العسكرية أو السياسية العسكرية ولكن اتضح في السنوات
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be speaking about the environmental security, a new era for Mediterranean cooperation and security. From a traditional point of view, we always talk about that it's military security. However, once we take a look at the latest researches, environmental security also comes to the surface. So globalization, technological development, and maritimization of development, these all contribute to the major security issues, and these reshape the Mediterranean area, an area of diverse growing challenges. Most of the time, it's military security that's been talked about, but all the latest researches always show us that it's also environmental security that is the case as well. From a traditional point of view, in the Mediterranean basin as well, climate security is of high importance as well. From a biological point of view, there is conflicts as well at the political sense. There are conflicts at the Mediterranean as well, but these also emerge as a biological as well, or zoopolitical, biological and zoological conflicts and disputes are from a climate and environmental perspective. This is also very much of importance. So there are definitions of environmental security, and all these demonstrate that after more than 2 decades of discussion, this concept of environmental security still has no widely agreed upon formulation. There's the environmental change, stress, and environmental degradation, and these are all relative to the issue of security. And this has an increased importance as new challenges have emerged since the end of Cold War. And most of the time, it's military aspects, but globalization and rapid technological development has also brought these. And there are many researches made in the regional and non-regional countries have also focused on studies which increase the importance of environmental security. Maritime security has expanded far beyond force and military power issues. We have seen this. The maritime environment security is based on 3 levels, and these are sustainable exploitation of natural marine sources, ecosystem protection and their various components, and the reduction of all potential risk sources associated with human activities, especially industrial activities. In our case, we consider the possibility that international law's implications, and these include maritime law, these could either reduce or amplify maritime security. Maritime environmental insecurity cycle contains different components and links between environmental risks, and these are deterioration, living resources loss, climate change, and water stress. These are the risks induced by global governance, and these are in favor of an ecological interference right. These connections directly affect social stability and socioeconomic well-being. From a summary point, if we could summarize, the climate and environmental security biological balance in the Mediterranean basin is important, and this may also cause climate deterioration and risk as well. So marine pollution, seawater desalination, and water security is certainly important. And from an ecological point of view, close links have been established between the scarcity of marine sources and deterioration of the good ecological state, climate change, and with environmental security. Also, links are possible between deterioration of environmental security and the phenomenon of massive migrations. To add to this, because of the development of scientific knowledge and the new technologies, the discovery of many substances, compounds, or functions of biotechnological interest, in particular medical, industrial, or for military applications in many marine species, this can be exacerbate the phenomenon of international trafficking of species or biopiracy in general. In this context, the national maritime space, it is already eminently strategic, and this becomes a field of multiple and geostrategic security issues because this becomes a source of food, water, and health security itself, and therefore the country's stability. In parallel with the effects of the very rapid technological development, some indicators at the international level show that the evolution of the international legal framework has a tendency. Food security is important, and in time we know food sources are depletable. There are also studies as to see alternative food sources from the marine sources, from the sea. So, for instance, Republic of Turkey for food security, Turkey has made a great step to protect its marine security as well. Food security and health security is important for the national security as well. Maritime, it's not only military or maritime, but it's the health security and food security as well. And there is this, this becomes the field of multiple and geostrategic security issue because of the source of food, water, and health security. And therefore, this becomes country stability. Once we take a look at the researches made by the WHO, 2/3 of the medicine are obtained from the marine sources. Many of the antibiotics, many Parkinson medicine, these are all from the biological sources from the sea, from them.
Örnek olarak baktığımızda özellikle gıda güvenliği ve aynı zamanda da
food security and
neredeyse 1/5 bizim halkımızın kendi güvenliğini ve içme suyunun da
1/5 of our community is also using drinkable water once the sea water is treated. After the water treatment, 1/5 of this seawater is treated to be presented to the use of our community.
بعد السلامة البيئية مرتبط مباشرة بسلامة أو إمكانيات تزويد الأفراد بالمياه الشروب. إذن هناك يعني قضية استقرار، قضية تلبية المطالب على مستوى المجتمع، وممكن إذا كان لا استقرار بالنسبة لتلبية مطالب الأفراد بالنسبة للماء الشروب، ممكن يكون فيه يعني عدم استقرار سياسي.
In our country, once we take a look at the vision of 2030, 40% of our drinking water will be will need to be obtained from the treated seawater. The food security will be obtained, therefore, and unless you state your food security, you can't have your national security.
الجانب الشرقي والاكتشافات الموجودة في مصر، الدراسات الاستكشافية على مستوى الساحل الجزائري والتونسي. إذن منطقة البحر
Even in Tunisia, in Egypt, there are many studies on this. The framework is there. Another security issue is certainly energy security is there in Tunisia and in Algeria. There are the Eastern Mediterranean, not only the food security, but also climate security, health security, food security is also important, just as the maritime security and the security and stability in the Eastern Mediterranean. The integrated and hybrid nature of maritime risks is also important. This is an unpredictable and challenging aspect. The countries, riparian countries, and to Mediterranean, and the countries there in the Eastern Mediterranean, they also focus on this. Major challenge here comes as the global environmental change and the interactions between ecosystems, mankind, and the effect of global environmental change on the environmental degradation, the effects of increasing social requests for resources, ecosystem services, and environmental goods as well. These countries, Tunisia, Egypt, Algeria, they have different maritime environmental security. They have a different level. They have their own. For instance, we have each country has their own levels of plans, and they have their own action plans. A risk-based approach, for instance, for maritime environmental security in Algeria is prepared for 2050. And there are 4 scenarios considered, and these are disaster scenario with contrasted evolution, an interference scenario, and as a last scenario, there's national control scenario. Good ecological status, maritime pollution, these are the variables that are taken into account. And what sort of an action plan each country will develop? There are different plans, especially for the biological and climate change and underground and above ground groundwater, and how these waters can be protected. They can have their own plannings. So disaster scenario variables, and these are all planned, or for the maritime environmental security scenarios for the horizon 2050. These are based on these. Many action plans are prepared. Areas of cooperation for this environmental security is also open. So the main axis of cooperation in relation to environmental security issues between the Mediterranean countries are diplomacy and scientific cooperation on the cross-border environmental risks. And there are new biodiversity as well. There are many different invasive species and microorganisms that have migrated to Mediterranean as well. So indigenous, non-dispersal of non-indigenous species, especially those presenting a toxic or dangerous or invasive nature, and these are all capable of occupying large marine areas. This is also very important. And risk analysis on various scales is important, in particular regional and sub-regional.
الأنظمة البيئية الطبيعية البحرية وكذلك الأبعاد الاجتماعية بالنسبة للخدمات البيئية.
Slaytlarda görebileceğiniz gibi de daha sonra da
As you can see in the slides, I will be very happy to share my slides with you about the climate change and the biodiversity, invasive species, water security, drinking water, and how these are Mediterranean countries, because these will be anticipating sufficiently in advance the trajectories leading to crisis linked to natural resources or to conflicts for the use between the countries on marine and natural resources. Therefore, I will be happy to share these with you. And
حول هذه الأنواع الداخلة وهذه الصورة بالنسبة للتنقل بين ناقلات البحرية في البحر الأبيض المتوسط.
Dar bir özellikle bir sahil şeritleri içerisinde de çok fazla hareketin ve sirkülasyon olduğuna ilişkin ve aynı zamanda da oradaki
there is high level of circulation and the transportation here. These harmful microorganisms are here. For instance, one of them is plastic. You can see the change between 1980 till 2015.
الموجودة بين الدول التي تشكل كذلك محور من محاور الدبلوماسية البيئية.
Yani aslında sınırı aşan bazı problemler de söz konusu. Siz de biliyorsunuz yeraltı su kaynaklarında.
As you know, the underground water and this may even lead to some kind of conflicts with regards to the use of resources in the best way possible. That's why this may lead to some conflict of interests and conflicts between and disputes between the countries unless there's an agreement achieved.
لم تستشرف من قبل. إذن المقاربة ستكون بالمخاطر ولكن المخاطر المتراكمة والهجينة.
Burada önemli olan bir nokta da var. Özellikle Akdeniz Havzası'nda yer alan ya da alan olmayan bir ülkede olsun. Aynı zamanda da bu ülkeler arasında da mutlaka bir çekişme söz konusu olacaktır. Özellikle
there will be a competition.
Zira bir ülkenin tek başına bu sorunlarla karşı karşıya kalması mümkün değil.
It's not only for one country to overcome these. That's very much important for the countries. It's very much important for the countries to cooperate and to develop a common approach to this.
Son olarak da diplomatik anlamda da işbirliğinin pekişmesi yönünde ülkelerin bu tür sorunlara karşı nasıl işbirliği içerisinde olacağına ilişkin birkaç noktadan bahsetmek istedim.
A number of points how the cooperation could be, and for instance, scientific diplomacy and scientific cooperation on cross-border environmental risks, and we can have funding for combined and cumulative risk mitigation, common observation platforms, and regional and sub-regional scale, and the cross-border effects of climate change, illegal migration, biopiracy, and the non-indigenous species elimination of these, in particular those presenting a toxic, dangerous, or invasive nature and capable of occupying large marine areas. And there are risks. These need to be analyzed on various scales, in particular regional and sub-regional. It's not possible for one country to preserve their own food security on their own. It's only possible through the cooperation and cooperation between the countries. It's not something that a country can undertake on their own. We need to have platforms of cooperation, cross-border platforms. Thank you so much. Thank you to the distinguished panelists. They have presented their different perspective for the Mediterranean security issues. And for this panel, do you have any questions? Maybe then we can, I would like to now moving on to the third session, and the chair will be Professor Dr. Murat Tezer from Yakın Doğu University. And we will have our panelist as Associate Professor Joseph Bohout from Beirut American University.